He was a top-secret spy with access to America's most sensitive secrets. But there was one big problem. He couldn't spell. And that tiny mistake is what led the FBI straight to him. How did they catch a man trusted with the nation's safety? On a frigid Monday morning in December 2000, FBI Special Agent Stephen Carr bolted from his cubicle in the Bureau's Washington, D.C. field office. He hurried down 2 flights of stairs, his pulse quickening with anticipation. A package had just arrived via FedEx from the FBI's New York office, and Carr had been entrusted with its contents. At 38, Carr was an intense and methodical agent known for his sharp focus and deep commitment to his work since joining the FBI in 1995. Though his career thus far consisted mostly of supporting roles in major espionage cases, Carr had been yearning to lead an investigation of his own. As his squad supervisor handed him the package that morning, she'd said, "This one's yours." Carr wasn't about to waste the opportunity. Back at his desk, Carr carefully unwrapped the package, revealing a stack of documents, several dozen pages. They had come from 3 separate envelopes handed over to the FBI by a confidential informant at the Libyan consulate in New York. Each envelope had been mailed to the consulate by an anonymous sender. Carr spread the pages across his desk, quickly organizing them into 3 groups, one for each envelope. The cover sheets of all 3 sets bore the same bold warning: "This letter contains sensitive information." Beneath the heading was a chilling directive: "This letter is confidential and intended for your president or intelligence chief. Please ensure it is passed via diplomatic pouch and avoid discussing its existence in your offices, homes, or through electronic means. Any deviation from these instructions may lead to detection by U.S. intelligence agencies." The contents of the envelopes painted an even more alarming picture. The first contained a 4-page letter filled with an intricate alphanumeric code, 149 lines long. The second envelope included a detailed set of instructions on decoding the letter. The third held 2 critical tools, one code sheet listing ciphers and another, 6 pages long, detailing dozens of brevity codes, shortened terms used to encode sensitive information. Carr scrutinized the encoded letter. Without the accompanying cipher and decryption guide, the content was incomprehensible, a seemingly random series of letters and numbers. But the sender's strategy was clear. By splitting the materials into separate envelopes, they hoped to reduce the risk of interception. What the sender hadn't anticipated was that all 3 envelopes would land in the hands of the FBI. FBI analysts in New York had already made progress deciphering portions of the letter. As Carr read through the decoded text, a sense of foreboding settled over him. "I am a Middle East North African analyst for the Central Intelligence Agency. I am willing to commit espionage against the U.S. by providing your country with highly classified information. I have top-secret clearance and access to documents from all of the U.S. intelligence agencies, including the NSA, DIA, CENTCOM, and others." The sender wasn't just offering to betray the United States, they were providing proof of their capabilities. Included in the package were 23 pages of highly classified documents, marked with designations like classified secret and classified top secret. The materials ranged from satellite imagery of military sites in the Middle East to intelligence reports on regional regimes. One document in particular sent chills down Carr's spine: a CIA internal newsletter containing sensitive information. Another consisted of low-altitude aerial photographs of Colonel Muammar Gaddafi's yacht in the Mediterranean, images taken not by U.S. intelligence but by a foreign agency. How the sender obtained these images remained a mystery, but their inclusion highlighted how dangerous this individual was. For Carr, the implications were staggering. This wasn't a mere leak or careless mismanagement of sensitive information. The sender was a deeply embedded operative within the U.S. intelligence community, with access to the government's most classified systems. It was espionage at its most brazen, a direct offer to sell American secrets to a foreign power. The significance of the case was not lost on Carr. Every document in the package screamed of betrayal, and each page was a glaring warning of the threat. As Carr sat at his desk, piecing together the scope of the conspiracy, he realized that his prayers had been answered, but not as he'd imagined. This wasn't just an investigation, It was a matter of national security, and Carr was now at its epicenter. The papers from the mysterious package were spread neatly across the desk, but Special Agent Stephen Carr knew they were more than just pages. They were clues. Each document, every line of decoded text, was a piece of a puzzle that had to be carefully pieced together. Carr was determined to crack it, but he wasn't working alone. Across from him sat Lydia Jakorek, a seasoned counterintelligence expert with years of experience untangling espionage cases. Her sharp eyes missed nothing. Carr pushed a binder across the desk toward her, his voice steady but urgent. "You have to look at this." Lydia glanced up, her curiosity piqued, and then began flipping through the pages. As Carr explained the context behind the received letters, detailing their contents and the implications, Lydia's demeanor shifted. At first, she was calm, processing the details, but as she reached the section where the decoded text mentioned the sender's offer of espionage, her eyes widened. Shock registered on her face as the gravity of what they were dealing with settled in. She glanced up at Carr, her expression mixed with disbelief and concern. "Are you telling me this is an inside job?" Lydia asked, her voice a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might collapse the whole case. Carr nodded, his mind racing through the possibilities. "It's not just an inside job. This person has top-secret clearance, access to everything. NSA, CIA, everything, and they're willing to sell it." The realization hit both of them. They were not just investigating a case of stolen documents. They were facing a major national security breach, one that involved someone deeply embedded within the U.S. intelligence apparatus. Carr knew they had to move quickly, but Lydia's reaction showed just how dangerous the situation was. "This changes everything," Lydia said softly, her focus now entirely on the documents in front of her. "We're looking at a mole, a serious threat to national security. We have to find out who this is before they strike." Carr didn't need any further prompting. They had a case to solve, and this was only the beginning. Carr began his report. One puzzle piece stood out, an email address buried in the coded message. The account, jacobscall@mail.com, was linked to someone named Stephen Jacobs from Alexandria. But when the FBI investigated, they discovered something strange. The account wasn't used for real conversations. Instead, it contained only test emails, like someone practicing, and messages about obtaining fake IDs. Digging deeper, Carr noticed a pattern. Whoever this Stephen Jacobs was, they logged into the email account from public libraries in the Washington, D.C. area. Mapping out the library locations revealed a tight cluster in Maryland near Bowie and Crofton. These towns weren't far from Fort Meade, home to the National Security Agency, NSA. That was a big clue. Carr had other suspicions, too. The way the codes were written suggested the sender had a military background. The person had top-secret clearance and access to Interlink, the private internet used by U.S. intelligence agencies. And then there were the mistakes. Odd spelling errors like anonymous instead of anonymous or reveal instead of reveal. Those weren't just slip-ups. They felt like fingerprints, unique to this person. Putting it all together, Carr began forming a theory. While the sender claimed to work for the CIA, the evidence pointed elsewhere. What if this was misdirection? What if the spy was NSA military personnel, someone with expertise in cryptology? "This is bigger than we thought," Carr said, his voice steady but urgent. "We need to move fast." Jakorek nodded. She reached for the phone and dialed a name Carr had recommended, Robert McCaslin, the NSA's counterintelligence chief. If anyone could help track a rogue insider, it was McCaslin. As Carr watched Jakorek make the call, he felt the weight of what was ahead. They weren't just looking for a traitor. They were racing against time to protect national security. And somewhere, the spy was still hiding in plain sight, beneath their nose. It was the early months of 1999, and Brian Regan was at a crossroads. For years, he had worked at the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, a secretive agency managing the intelligence gathered from U.S. spy satellites. From his desk, Regan had access to a world few could imagine: classified reports, satellite images, and data used by military units around the globe. But despite his high-security job, his personal life was unraveling. He was a special child at the school, a place he couldn't remember with fondness. Memories of being teased by classmates for being slow-witted still stung. His teachers hadn't thought much of him either. If they remembered him, it was probably as the boy who struggled to read, the one who couldn't get spelling right. His larger, heavier frame may have kept him safe from physical bullying, but it also made him stand out for all the wrong reasons. With severe dyslexia and social awkwardness, he was seen as the odd one out, the kid everyone thought was just plain dumb. Professionally, Regan felt stuck. He'd been offered a transfer to Europe, but he didn't want it. His financial troubles were piling up, and his marriage was strained to the breaking point. With his 20th anniversary of military service approaching, Regan had two options: take the European post or retire at 37. He chose retirement, but the decision brought no relief, only panic. How will I support my family, he wondered, anxiety gnawing at him. He had few skills outside the military, and his future felt uncertain. Regan had a history of breaking rules to get what he wanted. He'd swiped art supplies as a child and cheated on military tests as an adult, each time avoiding punishment. Over time, he came to believe that the key to success wasn't hard work or honesty, it was staying under the radar. Now he saw a chance to use his position at the NRO to solve his problems in one bold move: espionage. From his work maintaining Interlink, the private internet for U.S. intelligence agencies, Regan had access to highly sensitive information. He began systematically digging into the network, collecting classified details about topics like Libyan military operations and biological warfare. But Regan wasn't reckless. He studied everything he could about spies who had been caught, learning from their mistakes. He read about their methods through Interlink itself and attended counterintelligence training sessions, listening carefully as FBI and CIA veterans shared their wisdom. This is where they went wrong, Regan thought as he took notes on the failures of past traitors. He convinced himself he was smarter than all of them, certain he could outsmart even the sharpest investigators. This was no impulsive plan. It was the carefully crafted dream of a man desperate to escape his troubles and prove his worth. Brian Regan was about to embark on a dangerous path, one that would change his life forever and shake the foundations of U.S. intelligence. By the fall of 1999, Brian Regan's transformation from government employee to aspiring spy was fully underway. Each day at the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, he quietly gathered classified documents from Interlink, the secret internet used by U.S. intelligence agencies. But Regan wasn't like most spies. He wasn't recruited by a foreign government or handed a plan. He was acting entirely on his own, building his strategy piece by piece. Regan's target was clear: nations in the Middle East and North Africa. He saw countries like Iraq, Libya, Iran, and Sudan as ideal buyers for stolen U.S. intelligence. With the Cold War over, he believed these nations would pay top dollar for information that could give them an edge in regional conflicts. In his searches, Regan focused on the most sensitive data Interlink had to offer, information labeled top secret. He hunted for military intelligence about these countries and their rivals, including Israel. Each document he found felt like a piece of treasure, evidence of his growing access to secrets that foreign powers would covet. But Regan had another problem to solve: where to keep the documents. At first, he stashed the papers in a locked cupboard between office cubicles. It seemed like a clever hiding spot. But during one of Regan's assignments away from the office, the cupboard was removed by building staff. Unable to open it, they drilled through the lock and discovered hundreds of classified documents. When Regan was contacted about the cupboard, he didn't panic. He stayed calm and claimed ownership of the materials, as though it was no big deal. To his relief, the staff returned the documents without asking too many questions. After the close call, Regan moved the papers to a wall-mounted cabinet, convinced it was safer. He thought the change would keep his secrets secure, but each misstep brought him closer to discovery. Regan didn't know it yet, but his actions were leaving a trail. And the more he collected, the harder it would be to cover his tracks. By March 2000, Brian Regan was no longer just gathering secrets. He was moving them. Each morning, he packed his bag with gym clothes to conceal his true cargo: classified documents he'd smuggled out of the National Reconnaissance Office. Every trip past the security guards filled him with dread, but they never stopped him. To them, his gym bag was just that, a gym bag. Back at his townhouse in Bowie, Maryland, Regan transformed his basement into a secret archive. Hundreds of classified pages now lined his growing collection. But Regan wasn't satisfied with paper. Late at night, while his family slept upstairs, he expanded his haul. CDs containing sensitive files and training videos became his next target. He copied tapes in the dead of night, adding to the treasure trove of intelligence he planned to sell. Then in April, Regan took his most daring step yet. He sat down to write a letter, not just any letter, but a 13-page proposal to the Libyan intelligence service. Posing as a CIA analyst, he offered secrets that could reshape their understanding of U.S. operations. The price? $13 million. But Regan wasn't reckless. He devised a sophisticated plan to protect his identity. Using brevity, codes, and layered encryption, he crafted a system that would make decoding his messages nearly impossible without the right tools. To ensure secure communication, he provided instructions for a 1-800 number and outlined a clever backup plan. If Libya agreed to his deal, they were to confirm by placing a car ad in the newspaper, an innocuous signal that would go unnoticed by most, but understood by him. Regan believed he had outsmarted everyone. His encryption system, the anonymous contacts, and his confidence in avoiding detection all convinced him this plan would work. He saw himself as untouchable, a master spy operating in the shadows. What he didn't realize was that every move he made brought him closer to the spotlight he feared the most. In July 2000, with his family away on vacation in Sweden, Brian Regan seized the quiet to execute a critical phase of his plan. Left alone in his Bowie townhouse, he transformed the basement into a war room, methodically organizing his massive collection of stolen intelligence. Over 20,000 pages of classified documents, CDs, and videotapes lay before him, a staggering testament to months of smuggling and stealing. Regan categorized the files with meticulous care, separating those he planned to share with Libya and Iraq. Among these, he identified 5,000 pages containing the most sensitive information, intelligence so secret it could shatter national security if exposed. Determined to protect his treasure, Regan devised an elaborate plan. He sealed the most critical documents in Tupperware containers and double-wrapped them in garbage bags for waterproofing. These weren't just files to him. They were his insurance, his safeguard against an uncertain future. Carrying the packages, Regan drove to Patapsco Valley State Park, a sprawling forest just outside Baltimore. Deep in the woods, he buried 7 sealed containers, each hidden in a carefully chosen spot. To ensure he could find them again, he used the GPS logger from his job to record the exact coordinates of each burial site. As a backup, he hammered roofing nails into nearby trees, subtle markers only he would recognize. These buried secrets weren't intended for immediate use. Regan wasn't selling or trading this stash. Instead, they were his failsafe, a plan B if his espionage operation hit a roadblock. In his mind, the buried packages gave him control over his fate, his freedom, and his future. As he walked back to his car, leaving behind a forest dotted with invisible secrets, Regan felt a rare sense of satisfaction. His plan was unfolding perfectly, and he believed he was always one step ahead. But in the shadows of the trees, danger was quietly closing in. On May 23, 2001, Brian Regan's heart pounded as he floored the gas pedal, speeding out of the parking lot at his new job in Chantilly, Virginia. He'd recently retired from the Air Force and taken a position with defense contractor TRW, awaiting reinstatement of his security clearance to return to his old duties. But today, his focus wasn't on work. It was on the paranoia that had gripped him for months. Since secretly sending his espionage proposal to Libya in November, Regan lived in constant fear of being discovered. Every day felt like a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, with unseen eyes always on him. He developed strange habits to stay one step ahead, hopping off subway cars at the last moment, taking circuitous routes, and scanning his rearview mirror obsessively. That afternoon, Regan's paranoia reached a fever pitch. As he drove away from TRW, his eyes darted between the road ahead and the mirrors behind. When he reached the exit for Interstate 66, he made a sudden, dangerous swerve across lanes, cutting from the left all the way to the right. If anyone was tailing him, they'd have to match his erratic maneuver. For 10 miles, he raced down the highway before veering off at the exit for Manassas National Battlefield Park. Once inside the park, he turned onto a secluded dirt road, shut off the van, and sat motionless. His sharp eyes scanned the surroundings. Minutes passed. Nothing. A lone pickup truck ambled by, but it seemed harmless. To test whether he was being followed, Regan stepped out of the van, walked a short distance into the woods, and casually left 2 Mad magazines on the ground. Then he drove off, stopping for lunch before returning later to check. When he arrived, the magazines were still there, untouched. Relieved, he convinced himself he was safe. But Regan's instincts had failed him. The FBI had been tracking him since April, following a 6-month investigation. Analysts had matched stolen Interlink documents to Regan's computer at the National Reconnaissance Office. They even noted his consistent spelling mistakes, anonymous, allegations, reveal, as a signature clue. FBI agents had been watching Regan's every move. On that very day, as Regan drove erratically, agents shadowed him from a careful distance. When he turned onto the dirt road at the Battlefield Park, FBI surveillance specialists observed his behavior. "We've got a live one," one agent, Smitty, radioed to Special Agent Carr, who was leading the operation. "What do you mean?" Carr asked. Smitty described Regan's dangerous driving and his stop at the secluded area. "What's he doing now?" Carr pressed. "He's sitting in the van," Smitty replied. The agents couldn't follow Regan onto the dirt road in their own vehicle without risking exposure, so they dispatched a pickup truck to blend in and pass by his van. From their vantage point, they could see Regan waiting in silence, scanning his surroundings. Though leaving and retrieving magazines wasn't a crime, Regan's actions proved one thing beyond a doubt. He was on edge, fully aware that someone might be watching. To Special Agent Carr, this behavior wasn't just suspicious. It was confirmation that Regan was hiding something monumental. In Carr's eyes, the net was tightening, and Regan's paranoia only made his guilt more certain. On August 23, 2001, Brian Regan settled into his desk at the National Reconnaissance Office, back in the familiar rhythm of his workday. He logged into Interlink for what seemed like a routine 20-minute session, poring over classified information with practiced ease. His notes included highly sensitive details, like coordinates for Chinese missile sites. As he scribbled in his small notebook, he had no idea that hidden FBI cameras were watching his every move. Regan was preparing for what he claimed would be a family vacation to Orlando. In reality, he had other plans. That afternoon, he packed his belongings and left work, heading to Washington Dulles Airport. His destination wasn't Florida, but Zurich, Switzerland, where he intended to meet with Iraqi and Libyan officials to offer his services as a spy. Around 4 p.m., Regan navigated through airport security and boarded a crowded shuttle to his departure gate. The atmosphere was mundane. Travelers stood shoulder to shoulder, gripping bags and chatting quietly. But as the shuttle doors were closing, 2 men entered with purpose. They were FBI agents Carr and his colleague, blending into the crowd until they reached their target. "Mr. Regan," Carr said, flashing his badge, "I'm with the FBI. We have a couple of questions for you. Do you mind coming with us?" Regan froze. His eyes darted from Carr to his badge and then to the agent's colleague. After a moment of hesitation, he gave a small nod. "Sure," he said, picking up his duffel bag. The agents led him off the shuttle and into a private room within the airport. Once inside, Regan's calm demeanor began to crack as they placed him in handcuffs. The search that followed was revealing. Among his belongings, the FBI found a trove of cryptic materials. In his shoe, a slip of paper hidden between the inner and outer soles, listing addresses for Iraqi and Chinese embassies in Europe. In his pocket, a spiral notebook containing 13 seemingly random words like tricycle, rocket, and glove, alongside an index card with 26 more unrelated terms. In his wallet, a small scrap of paper bearing an indecipherable string of letters and numbers, 56 NVOAI. In his duffel bag, a folder with 4 sheets of handwritten 3-digit codes, carefully organized but impossible to decode on the spot. When questioned, Regan gave nothing away. His lips remained sealed, his face betraying no emotion. Carr, however, recognized the significance of these items. They weren't just random notes, they were puzzle pieces, part of a complex web of espionage that Regan had been weaving for years. The FBI had succeeded in capturing their man, but the work was far from over. The materials Regan carried hinted at a far deeper plot, one that would take another 2 years to fully unravel. While he sat in custody, his secret caches of intelligence and encrypted messages remained hidden in the woods, challenging the agents to crack his carefully constructed codes. For now, though, the nation could breathe a little easier. The spy was no longer in the shadows. In the aftermath of Brian Regan's grand jury indictment, the NRO, desperate to recover the stolen documents and prevent further damage to national security, offered him a deal. Reveal the encryption codes that would allow the government to retrieve the sensitive materials, and in return, Regan would face a relatively light sentence of no more than 9 years in prison. However, Regan, ever defiant, rejected the offer, instead proposing a deal of his own. He demanded that all charges be dropped, or he threatened to withhold the documents and leave the government with no way to recover them. Regan's gambit was clear. He was attempting to blackmail the United States government, using the stolen secrets as leverage to secure his freedom. In doing so, he revealed just how far he was willing to go in his betrayal. As FBI agent Stephen Carr's supervisor, Lydia Jekorek voiced her concerns, the stakes became evident. Letting Regan off with a slap on the wrist could set a dangerous precedent. Yet there was a problem. The FBI lacked the means to crack the encryption codes on its own. This is where Regan, in his arrogance, made a critical mistake. He tried to manipulate the situation by smuggling a letter to his wife, instructing her to bury certain items, seemingly innocent objects like a Garmin GPS unit, a shovel, and a set of handwritten maps. His plan was to present these objects during his defense as part of a fabricated narrative that he had been preparing a treasure hunt for his children. But the NRO saw through his ruse. The letter's discovery was a turning point, and they made it clear to Regan that his wife would be charged with obstruction of justice unless he complied. Faced with the threat of his wife's imprisonment, Regan finally relented. He agreed to break the encryption codes and provide the government with access to the stolen documents, but only in exchange for his wife's freedom and the assurance that he would receive a life sentence, rather than facing the death penalty or a lengthy prison term. This final turn in the story marked the end of Regan's cat-and-mouse game with the authorities. His defiance had cost him dearly, but in the end, his attempts to control the situation backfired. The stolen secrets were recovered, and Regan's fate was sealed. His years of calculated espionage had led him to a bitter conclusion, marked by his own arrogance and ultimate surrender.